My big suggestion to students, particularly through high school, is
you can do anything.
Choose it for you, not for it is worth
it. Just focus on the next step.
Doesn't matter what you're doing.
Don't be afraid.
As long as you're doing something.
That is such good advice.
I don't think I could see myself doing
It's a
anything
challenging life.
Student nights, Wednesday to Saturday.
I worked on that house.
I racked up every single dollar of debt that I
I
possibly
think there's a lot of pressure on high school.
Yeah, I
kids
just
these days,
love working outside.
And if money is something that you care a lot
In
about.
hindsight,
I've also been a very indecisive
But you
person.
keep looking for roads that have been less
It
travelled.
was just that moment that I knew what I wanted to do. So nothing else is going to change that.
Welcome to the guest speaker.
Today on the guest speaker, we're joined by someone very special who will be able to provide insight into the pathway of law. Jacinda Johnston is an accomplished lawyer who understands this career well. Law is a study directed to a certain student demographic, those that do well at school. They often get told that it's what they should do because they're bright, not necessarily that their personality or skills are well suited to it. Today, I'm looking forward to challenging some of those preconceived notions about studying law, the complexities of the job, the daily tasks, the environment and the pressure. I have no doubt it'll resonate with many who see it as their ideal pathway, while others will realise that chestnut, you should study law, may be ill-founded. Your academic achievements are impressive. Among many accolades at school, you earned a scholarship in geography, something you and Grace have in common, and you achieved fantastic results in all of your subjects. You went to Waikato University where you completed a Bachelor of Law with a second major in political science. Your final semester was spent studying abroad at Chicago Kent College of Law, an experience I know many aspiring lawyers will be fascinated to hear about. After university, you took the classic OE to the UK, working in a bar and as a nanny to fund your travels before beginning your legal career at Pigeon Law in Auckland, then Tompkins Wake, where you've worked for over 10 years. After many years in the Auckland office, you've now transitioned to Hamilton. Recently promoted to Special Counsel. Don't know what that means, we'll ask you soon. Your expertise and dedication have been widely recognised. You were named New Zealand Lawyer Rising Star in 2023, and you are a recommended lawyer in real estate and construction by the Legal 500 Asia Pacific for 2025-2026. Now living back in Cambridge with your husband and young daughter, you are balancing ambition, family life, and the pressures of a demanding legal career. This podcast is designed for students considering a career in law to understand what they'll study, what the workload is really like, just how competitive it is, and what life in the profession truly involves. There are pressures, certainly, but there are also enormous opportunities for those willing to put in the work, as you clearly prove. Taking you back to school, I've probably painted a rosy picture. Again, that law student who does well and everyone says they should trudge off to do law. But can I get your reflections on your education and how that went and how you coped with it?
Yeah, I really enjoyed school. I think you sort of followed me up a few times on some of the homework for this and noted that maybe I was a bit different to school. But yeah, I was definitely not nerdy, but I enjoyed it and I sort of worked really hard at everything. Yeah, pretty fond memories. You saw recently I've got a group of 7 of us, I think, girls from high school, and we still catch up regularly. We managed to get almost all of us together a few weeks ago, which was awesome. So I have really positive memories for the most part of it.
Yeah. Did you get involved in, other than academic, were there other things? Like I'm thinking, probably a perception some kids have is often you're maybe very having to stand in front of people and maybe argue or present something. Were you into any sort of debating, any sort of theatre, any sort of other things other than your study that kids might think resonate with law?
Yeah, I didn't really. I was on the student executive, it was called. Yeah. So did some of that stuff, I guess, leading the assemblies and things. But for the most part at school, I didn't really do anything particularly that I thought would, lead me into a good role in terms of law. I think probably as well at that point, I wouldn't have had a clue that there are all the different types of law and what that involved. So sort of knowing about those things, I did know that I needed to do English-based subjects. So I did lots of English, I did history, geography. I took biology as a science just because that was the most written science. But definitely I don't think I did sort of those extracurricular things to lead into that.
So you probably answered one of the questions. Your recommendation for law is those real literate, which is something we're often told. If you're going to do law, you maybe do the history because it involves a lot of research, your geography because you're writing, and maybe you look at people in the environment, which is sometimes an issue. So they are the recommendations.
Yeah, definitely. Those English subjects. The interesting thing is, in the sciences, in my mind, I was like, right, I'll keep it broad. So I did biology, but a lot of when I went to the States, I got quite into doing like copyright and trademarks and things like that. And interestingly, a lot of the jobs here, you sort of actually need like the sciences degree to back some of that up. And so, I had absolutely no idea about that. And so that sort of, shut down, not necessarily shut down some of those paths, but sort of, I guess, if you sort of know what type of law you're going to go into, there may be some other considerations.
Yeah, which we will touch on. So you're suggesting to me already, although we might go back to this, if I was going to do environmental law as a specialist, probably better I know something about the environment, maybe.
Yeah, yep. I mean, I don't think it hurts. And also as well, like, I think you should be doing stuff at school. I don't think it helps you get into a law degree. I don't know now. I know a lot of them possibly are sort of closed and you are fighting. I think almost all of them now you fight to get into based on the papers you took in the things. But you've got to go to school for however many years and do some stuff that you like as well. I always did PE, and as much as I said I did English things, for me those weren't a chore for me. Like, I liked geography, I liked history, so I think there's that balance of doing stuff for that degree, but also don't make you, especially like your last year of school, miserable just because you're doing those things.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the last year of school, because I think I promised you very early on in your schooling that you'd go to the Gold Coast if you stayed the whole time. And maybe one of the skills I referred to was the fact you organised that entire trip, because I didn't have the skill set to do it. So they didn't ride your skill. I think you did everything from the permission slip home to the passport collection to the everything. So yeah, shout out for that. So look, when did you, Jacinda, start thinking law, or at what point in your schooling was it something it always resonated with you? Where did you get that advice? And then how did you do your application process? Did you consider multiple universities? So talk me through that decision making.
Yeah, it was, I can't remember when it was, but I actually went to Christchurch to stay with a family member, and we went to a debating or mooting competition actually at the university. She was just like, this might be fun. And at that point, I'd sort of not expressed any interest in law whatsoever. But I really found it really interesting, just, the way that it all unfolded. I previously had thought that I wanted to be a vet. And then actually when I discovered some of the things that you had to do as a vet, I'm not very good with bodily fluids and things like that. So that sort of changed it. But that really resonated with me. And I think probably combined with, I think they had the university open days and things like that. And I went to a few of the different law not classes, but offerings there to just sort of see what it was all about.
And so your application, Waikato was your first and only choice?
Yeah, I was originally looking at going to Victoria. And then I have a much younger sister. And so kind of part of the pool for staying at home was just actually being around to hang out with her. So I ended up, just deciding to go to Waikato and living at home to save some money off mum and dad.
Yeah. No, cool. So look, can you, I don't know, articulately summarize why go through the study of law, like, maybe what first year looks like. I mean, I've heard rumors, it's really competitive. If you don't get a certain mark, for example, maybe you don't make second. But what topics are you studying? What are you learning to start with? And then how does that change as you go through your degree? So kids sitting there actually get a proper insight into the actual study.
Yeah, so the first part of it is definitely, I think it's almost the first, so it was a 4-year degree. The first 3 years you basically do what you're told to do.
Yep.
So they're set paper. This might have changed because I have been out for a while now. At Waikato, the way it used to work was that once you were in, as long as you weren't failing, you got to keep going through. I know at sort of Victoria and Wellington at Auckland University, that wasn't the case. You fought to get in, and then each year they culled the numbers down that came through. I don't know what those situations are like, and especially not at Waikato now. But so the first few years is a lot of you just do all the papers, and I think the first year particularly, they're not really teaching. They're teaching you how to think like a lawyer. So you're basically just being given a whole bunch of information, reading cases and learning how to take that information and create the argument that you're after. And then in the 4th year, we got to choose electives. So you have to do ethics, which is something that we're bound by as lawyers. And then, you got to choose a bunch of different papers. I couldn't tell you what I did. I don't recall. I know when I went to Chicago, because again, I had set papers there. So I had to do international law and I had to do comparative law. So that compared law in the different jurisdictions. And then I did energy law and copyright law. And this is going to sound terrible, but all I needed to do was basically pass in Chicago, and that would pass me back in New Zealand. So I chose papers in Chicago, 1, that were interesting, but 2, so that I had like a 4-day weekend, so that I could go and do cool stuff while I lived in Chicago.
How did the Chicago experience come about?
So Waikato Uni then offered exchanges to, I think it was Chicago, Denmark, and somewhere else, maybe Belgium. And you just basically applied for it and managed to get it. And I went with another girl from Waikato Uni who I'd never actually met while we'd been at university, but was definitely one of the greatest experiences. I think Chicago isn't somewhere I would have gone, but it is a phenomenal city that's full of like the sports and the comedy, and the music is great. So and a really different experience. I remember day 1 of university, they actually spoke about the Rainbow Warrior, and I was like, cool. And you sort of open your mouth and the whole class turns, and you forget about the fact very quickly that you sound different to all of them. Sort of, I was like, oh, okay. But a very different way of the way they worked there, which will not be the same anymore. But like, I walked into uni there with my pad and pen, and they all had laptops, and just was a really different vibe, and all of their exams and stuff were all done on your computer. So I almost felt like I was a bit behind just because I wasn't really used to that sort of thing. So, I mean, that's definitely not an issue that people will be facing today.
No. So talk me through everyone's going through those 4 years. When do you start to become like a commercial lawyer or an environmental lawyer, and what are the types of lawyers? Because as you said, there may be kids sitting there thinking, well, there's a particular law that really resonates with them. Can you talk us through any of that?
Yeah, so you choose those subjects, and then quite the interesting thing is that you learn how to think like a lawyer at university, but you don't really learn how to be a lawyer until you do your professionals. So you do a land law paper, which when I did it was an entire year. And not once in that year did I see a sale and purchase agreement, which is the fundamental part of land law, is how you transfer land, and it's a standard form that almost every sale and purchase of land uses. And so that's just that contrast of you're looking at all the cases and all of those things, but not actually looking at that practical side of it. So you do your 4-year degree, and then you have to do what's called your professionals. And it's I think there's 2 providers, and you basically do, I think you can do it sort of online, and then you go in class for a set periods, or I think you can just do a really condensed full on. And you do, and there you pick, when I did it, it was 2 different types. So there was private client, I think, which is stuff like your land law, and things like that. And then the other side of it was probably more of your disputes and things like that. I can't recall, but up until I went to Chicago, I felt a bit disheartened about law, if I'm honest. I didn't really know what I wanted. Nothing had really resonated with me and I didn't know any lawyers, so I didn't have like people to have those conversations with that could be like give you any insight and things like that. And so I sort of, in Chicago, sort of doing that copyright was like really interesting to me. I think probably copyright in America is a lot more interesting, and obviously takes a lot more than does here. But there are so many different types. So I work in commercial property. So that's leasing. So if a cafe runs from a building, I sort of deal with the contract for that cafe to operate from that building. But then I also do the buying and selling of that building and sort of big shopping malls and things like that. And so that kind of, if I'm honest, when I went for a job, I knew what I didn't want to do. So I knew I didn't want to do family law. I'm way too much of an emotional person to deal with that. So I had things I didn't want to do, but then I was open to, and then it just came down to where I could get a job to start with, which I'm sure is the same for a lot of people in a lot of industries. I emailed CVs off. I drove to Auckland and dropped CVs off to some places, and I was lucky enough to get the job at Pigeon Law. And funnily enough, she actually said to me afterwards that her and her husband, it was down to me and another, which kind of goes back to that keeping things broad and not just doing things for the sake of it. She sort of said that I was chosen in the end because I had some bar experience, and her husband kind of was like, oh, like she'll be good at Friday night drinks kind of thing, like jokingly. But, there was just some of that. Didn't come down to had I done English and biology, it was some of those extra life experiences that I had. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
you mentioned family law wasn't for you. Can you give me any more titles like family law is one? Because some kids might want family law.
Yep.
But I'm presuming you're thinking because I'm not going to speak what would be underneath family law that you might deal with, and what are some other headings? If are you commercial and residential? Did I say or?
Yeah.
So what are some of the others, and what might they do?
So the family law is anything from like care of children, so where there's issues with children, separations, so marriage separations, all of those sort of things, and that's exactly it. It was just that, I guess when kids are involved, this was even before I became a mum. I knew that I couldn't deal with that. So in terms of the things, be easier through what sort of my firm does. Another area is employment. So it's acting for both employers and employees where there's disputes, reviewing employment contracts and things like that, possibly dealing with WorkSafe. Then you've got the environmental team, local government. So they deal with councils and regulatory work, the district plans, so for what you're allowed to do with your properties and things like that. There's the corporate team, which do deal more with companies and maybe the buying and selling of companies. That's often a big one that, people think of like the suits, the big, that's the one that everyone sort of glamorizes. Yeah, then it is the private client, so which is doing trusts and wills. So it's more dealing with, that one would more deal with your everyday people, with getting them through with their everyday things that they need in life. And then the big one is the disputes, I guess. So going to court and dealing with that stuff. So when you qualify, so you do your professionals and then you have to get admitted to the bar. And it's not like America. There's no big exam. Once you've done your professionals, you fill out some forms and then you go to court and wear your wig and your gown, and you get sworn in. You sign a register, so you sign your name in a big book, and there's if you are bad, if you do things against the rules, you can be what's called struck off, and they actually go through that book and strike you off the book. So it's quite cool. So you sort of, when you sign it, you usually flip back and have a look to see if anyone's been struck off. But when you're admitted, you are called what's a barrister and solicitor. So that means I can go to court and do all of those things, and then I can also do the things in the office and things like that. And then you can choose, which a lot of people that you see on the news, to just become a barrister, and those people are the people that do all the court work.
Right.
There's other differences between them, but those are sort of the main ones.
Okay. So you rock up to, when you work for a law firm, you rock up, you could have hundreds of people in your building, from front of house to lawyers to support worker. Like it's a big business. When I talked about Tompkins Wake.
Yeah.
What's your daily life look like? Yeah. Do you have a list of clients and and the door's shut because you're busy, you're typing something up, or you're researching, or you're off to court? How does it look?
Yeah. So when I first started, I was at Pigeon Law there was maybe 4 of us, which was amazing as a first job, just to really get hands-on experience. And the Joanna Pigeon, who I worked for, she was the president of the Auckland District Law Society, and she was just this wealth of knowledge, but she also was like really great at getting you out and networking and things like that. And I also worked with an associate there who was, again, just amazing at teaching me and getting me into really, really good practices. So when I was there, I kind of did, I guess, lots of the not basic work, but just sort of, it's more about learning. And when I was there, I actually did some junioring for a barrister who's now a King's Counsel. So I went to court with him a few times, and it was really interesting. So I very quickly learned I do not like to stand up in court in front of people, which matches my personality. I don't particularly like to really put myself out there. On the other hand, I did love being in there and being able to sort of hear the other side and be like, that's wrong, sort of thing. But yeah, the barrister I work with, he sort of said, he was just like, I think you're supposed to do this. And I was like, nah. So, and then, yeah, I moved to Tompkins Wake. And so they are now, the CEO just said, I think it's 30 partners and 200 staff. So that's across lawyers as well as our assistants. And we're spread across 4 offices. So Auckland, Rotorua, Tauranga and Hamilton. Hamilton's the main hub. It's where it started and then has spread. So I kind of have a bit of a mix of work. So we do our own commercial property things with our own clients. And then we also provide support to the other teams. So if the corporate team are, say, acting for somebody that's acquiring a business, they will have property aspects that need to be reviewed as part of that. And so then we support them there with those things. So we sort of I stay in my lane in terms of the commercial property, but I guess get a bit more of a broader interaction with different teams and things like that with the different areas.
How many times do you get a sort of this is interesting? Like you've never said, like someone comes to you with something you're specifically qualified in, and you don't stick to your standard, maybe knowledge of what's going on. You think, well, this is quick. Does that happen?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. There's definitely. I'm sort of trying to think of. We've done some stuff with the Waikato Regional Theatre, the new theatre, which has been an amazing project to be a part of. So it's quite hard because we have confidentiality rules, so I can't tell you almost anything that I've done. But it's quite cool to definitely be able to drive around and be like, I was involved with that, and and I was involved with that, and I still think even that it's different numbers now. But when I first started, I was doing residential conveyances for like $400,000. And then I sort of moved on to doing commercial transactions for, $90 million and up, be worth more nowadays kind of thing. But I just remember that change of, those extra numbers on a contract was a little bit of a shock from there. But it's just, there's a lot of doing the same stuff, but then every now and then those different things come in and you're just like, okay, that's quite cool and good to get a bit of the head going as well, with a bit of a challenge rather than the stuff that you're sort of used to.
Have there been a few balls up moments?
Definitely. Yep. There's I was talking about one recently actually, and we have a partner in the firm that if something goes wrong, they sort of you have the discussion as to whether we need to notify insurers, and the partner back then, he's actually just become a high court judge. James McGillivray. I know the name.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not. Yeah. And so he's just become a high court judge, and he was the insurance assessor at the time. And I was had been on the street, on the phone to my mum crying, because I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. I've just made this horrific mistake. But the great thing about, I guess, being in those firms is having those people that bring you back down really quick and are really supportive. And so he just sort of sat me through, and we went through the whole file, and he sort of said to me, he was like, well, you would have ended up in exactly the same position if you'd done what you were supposed to. We just would have got there faster. So in this thing that I thought was this horrific, big mistake, he was like, it's fine. He was like, yes, you didn't follow their instructions, but if you had, we would have ended up in the same position anyway. So a lot of the times you think you've done something, but everything's for the most part fixable. But the biggest thing, and that's what we say to the juniors as well, is the sooner you own up to it, the sooner you contact someone, the sooner that we can fix it and sort of minimize anything. On the other hand, we're actually our current new sort of challenge is AI, and people sort of putting their problems into AI and then sending it to you, or they sort of ask AI to draft them, draft me a sale and purchase agreement. And great, cool, using AI, but a lot of the time we actually just have standard forms, and so us having to review what they've drafted to either amend that or try and put it into something actually ends up costing more. So that's definitely, and same, we get these questions and they, again, ChatGPT spat it out, and I'm like, I don't even know what that question's asking. And if I do find out, you're definitely not going to understand what the response is, kind of thing. So, there's that. It's almost that opposite end now where clients have got too much information.
And not enough, because that was the other thing. And did you ever want to do clerking? Like, was that an option, or were you more focused on your studies? Like, was that something that could have, or for our listeners, you would recommend if they're going to do law study?
Yeah, I don't think I was ever aware of it as an option.
Yeah.
And I think there's definitely a lot more awareness of all of those different things, because again, the same when I was doing internships, it was only basically the big five, so Bell Gully and Chapman Tripp, that did internships.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of firms do. There's just so much more availability of it. So I applied for an internship, but again, you were fighting for every law student for just that, 6 firms basically. And so I would definitely, if you can, I would definitely recommend getting into the internship, because a lot of the time that's your foot in the door. And if you're not terrible, then a lot of the time it does lead to a job offer.
You mentioned your first employer was so heavy on let's network, let's get you out there. I can imagine that stays true from the internships right into where you are now, where having good relationships with others at different firms or in different places is probably very advantageous.
100%. Yeah. And that's definitely, I think law has definitely got elements of that who you know. Particularly a lot of people, and they've got jobs because their mum knows someone or something like that, and that's great. But I think that's why those internships are also a good thing, because if you're particularly not in a position where you didn't know anybody, that's kind of your foot in the door. But as I said, I didn't know anyone. I didn't do an internship. I dropped CVs everywhere.
I hope I was listening right, and I'm not going to contradict what you've just said. What is it when, because my son's girlfriend went after school and started working in a law firm and started to do studies on the side, and is working towards, and in the end, she could actually keep, rather than go to university, she could keep working within the industry. It would take longer, I presume. Do you know what I'm talking about?
So I presume she is still studying.
Yep.
But she's working while she's studying. She could be studying as a because you can do, like, you don't have to do your law degrees, full time. There's also options to do like a legal executive degree. Yeah. So I think those are sometimes run through Wintex. The university might offer them, I'm not sure. But yeah, and so we have lots of those, and so they're sort of bound by their own rules, same idea though, same ethics and all of those sort of things. And so as a lawyer, you've got an obligation to do 10 hours of continuing professional development every year, and I'm pretty sure legal executives is the same. So we've got lots. It's quite common for a legal executive in, like, particularly the property area. That's a really common area where, because I guess that, I'm not sure, but we do have lots of them at the
So it is a shout out that kids, maybe it's a start to see whether they like it without fully committing to the study. And then obviously if they got to the legal executive and then wanted to become a full-fledged lawyer, I'm sure so definitely a shout out there that people could look into. Can I just talk money for a bit, Jacinda? One, it probably varies, I'm not sure. What the layman thinks lawyers are expensive. You sell a house and you give half the property to the lawyer.
Yeah.
What does it, I come in tomorrow, and I contacted you a while ago and said, unfortunately you were pregnant at the time or having a baby, and I said, I'm on a house. What does that sort of cost me per hour for your time? And what sort of wage is a lawyer, a general one, on, not having to name yours? What are we talking about?
Yeah, so it's quite funny because when I started, everyone was like, yeah, you're a lawyer. And I actually started out earning a lot less money than almost all of my friends. So I started on 45 grand a year. So a lot of teachers start higher than that. But I have a much greater, range that I can earn. So most firms have you sort of start as a solicitor, and then you sort of got a senior solicitor / associate, and then you go to sort of the same levels, and then you go to a senior associate, and then the normal pathway would be to go become a partner. And there's usually different types of partners. So you've got a salary partner who earns a salary, and then you've got an equity partner who's got a stake in the business, basically. You alluded to it earlier, so I am a special counsel, and it kind of sits a little bit out to the side between senior associate and partner. And so it just gives me a bit of autonomy to run some of my own files and build up a bit of a practice, I guess, because to become a partner, you need to have that client base and be able to make your own money, basically, for the firm.
So chuck some numbers at me, just vague.
Yeah, sorry. So the hourly rate is really, it's such a broad thing. I think probably our highest is in the 700s. And then our lowest would be like 150, 180, but that's probably for our sort of summer clerks. I think the solicitors are probably early 200s. And so in terms of on a file, you'd have a range of those, and then the hourly rates sort of sit in between there. And so the idea is the work should be being done at the appropriate rate. So for buying and selling a house, our partner shouldn't be doing that, but the partner will be, I guess, supervising it. So they will have some time on there, but not hours and hours. So we work in 6-minute units. So I record my time. So every hour of my time is accounted for in 6-minute units, basically. And again, because I'm higher up, I am for the most part supervising rather than doing all the work, unless I'm working on something that is very meaty. But in saying that, the idea is too that because I am higher up, I'm more efficient.
Yeah.
So I can do those same jobs just faster. So it's all that kind of balance. But for lots of the stuff that your everyday people need, so your conveyancing of your house, your wills, and things like that, most firms have set rates for those. And so most people will happily give you an estimate. Although lots of those things come into, there's always issues. And sometimes it's the ones that you think are going to be the most easy that have got the worst problems. And in terms of salaries, it is, again, such a range. Like if you're a full equity partner, I don't know about the big firms, but, $900,000, things like that. But that's, if you're full equity. Most salaried people aren't earning anywhere near that.
So do you sell your soul in terms of your work-life balance for this money? Like, because that would be the next question, wouldn't it? A lot of people would like to earn that sort of money.
Yeah.
But would you cut off your arm for it in terms of your week time? And I mean, you're a mum now, and you're a wife, and all the rest, and you want to stay fit and healthy. How does that stress even out, do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think it's so there's Tompkins Wake is definitely they really aim for that work-life balance. And I think part of that's come from being based in the Waikato to start with. In saying that doesn't mean that when we need to work hard, we do. So if you need to be in the office late, but for the most part, it's a really good lifestyle that I do. I do work, and I have flexibility around, sort of when I first started back off maternity leave, I was like, I'm going to work these hours, and then we actually tried to work with and it didn't work with daycare and stuff like that and pickups. And we now have that flexibility of being able to work from home. So I do 1 day a week. But there's definitely, as I say, when you're on a project, these deadlines, same with if you go to court, you've got deadlines and those are the deadlines, and often they're quite short. And so when those things come in, you've just got to do it. A lot of those big firms, they would definitely be a lot longer hours, particularly as a junior staff member. You will, be working incredibly long hours and, weekends and things like that.
I don't want you to have an employment issue next week, but can I talk to you about the culture? Like I've heard we've even interviewed a couple on this podcast. They've gone to law school in, say, Wellington, and gone as a young woman and gone, man, this male image thing is not great. There's been articles of some firms in Auckland where it's been pretty horrific, a real sort of, almost the Suits type environment. So is that what your experience is, and where does that come from? Obviously, it's not going to happen in your place, but your thoughts.
There's 100% zero surprises about any of the stuff that's in the news. There is still a lot of that work hard, play hard mentality. And as I say, when you've finished a project, some of those big number of projects, your whole project team, and it's lawyers and clients on all sides and stuff, go out for a celebration. I mean, you get a $100 million transaction across the line. It's pretty good feeling, so there are those environments, but I just think you can kind of get the vibe possibly from some of the places. So again, I worked in a very small, family driven firm. Not on the basis of some of those things you're alluding to, but I did actually work at one of the big 5 firms. I actually only worked there for 3 months and I was miserable. And so I caught up with a couple of my workmates from Tompkins. So I left Tompkins Wake to go there. And with their blessing, I went there to try and I was like, I want to get some big firm experience and come back. And then, I caught up with them and I was like, I hate it. And so the partner I worked for actually came and sort of said, he was like, do you want me to get you a job offer back? And I said, yes. And that came down to just like you said, those relationships and stuff like that. So I can tell you the name of like our CEO's kids, everyone in my team's kids. I know their husbands. I know so much about almost everyone that I work with. Whereas at this firm, they just didn't have that sort of sharing. I'm quite a people person, and so they just didn't have that sort of stuff. I mean, there was obviously other issues as well, but that was kind of it. And I think that's that thing. It's really hard to get those vibes when you're interviewing. And so like when I joined Tompkins Wake for the first time, I actually said to the partner, I was like, it's really important to me. I'd like to come and meet the team. And so I did. I went and met the team first. And again, you're having coffee and everyone's on their best behavior. But it was quite good to sort of see some of the personalities. And I actually think that's not Tompkins Wake does do that. So you sort of do your interviews with your partners and things like that, but they actually do try to organise potential staff members to have coffees with more junior members of the team. And so I actually think that's really useful to sort of say, I guess you could, if you hated it or whatever things, maybe those conversations could be had then. So I think that's definitely something is to consider, sort of whether you can have that opportunity to sort of meet with the people that also it's really hard to ask questions of partners in HR. They're scary, especially when you're first job and stuff like that. So to be able to have some of those relationships is quite good. But I'd like to think that the industry's changing. It's becoming a lot more females are coming through the industry, and I'm not saying it's only the males that are the problem. But there's particularly like the partnership, our firm is, if it's not even, it's almost even females and males, and so those sort of things are changing, and I think some of those cultures will change with that too.
Yeah. So in terms of talking to maybe kids aspiring lawyers or the ones who were told they should study law, what would your advice be in terms of, you've probably given a lot of it maybe already, the subjects at school really written. What is your feedback to them in terms of the type of career they're entering? Is it challenging? Is it rewarding? Is it something that you can see yourself in for life? Yeah, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I guess it's probably one of those like love-hate relationships, which I think is probably the same with all jobs. Particularly I found coming back from maternity leave, I was like, what am I doing? Leaving my baby kind of thing. But I do really enjoy, and I think that's that key of, again, it's the same with any job you do, is actually having a drive for it. So if it's something that you sort of get out of, and for the most part, I do, because we do some cool stuff. There was definitely times over that COVID period where I really didn't enjoy it. It was really negative. And again, which leads back to that, I don't do disputes or court work and those sort of things, because I do help those positive things. So I think it's just making sure that it is what you think it is, and that you do enjoy it, because once you're in it, it's, again, like any career, you're doing it potentially for a long period of time. So, and I think sometimes those, which I alluded to earlier, those internships are sometimes also quite good, because you can actually have the opportunity to move around the different areas of law too, which is quite good because again, you might have a perception of what something's like, and then until you get in there and do it, it's really hard. A lot of that court work, especially as a junior, it's a hell of a lot of research and reading, and that's probably quite overwhelming. But I think it's just, you just got to look forward what's coming and things like that.
Wicked. So what I sort of like, before Grace starts to wrap up, seems to me you've actually dispelled a lot of my myths. You've been able to study law and pursue it as a career based on your personality. You acknowledge there's certain things you don't like. So it's not like you're always forced, you just specialize.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you are a performer and you want to be the man in court or whatever, by all means that's available to you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something that was really important to me. Probably that last bit actually was really interesting around the reading, the intense reading. That I don't just come to you all the time and you just have the thing in your head ready to come back to me. That's lovely, Blair, but I'm going to go away.
Yeah.
I'll get back to So I think that and that will resonate a lot with kids. That's that constant learning, that research, that investigative stuff, which I think was really important. But look, I think you've really helped us here. I think there'll be a lot of kids, again, I go back to teachers saying to kids or certain people, parents, go and study law just because they're bright. I think what today it's really important to, that environment, and some of the add-ons you've given us in terms of things to look out for are really cool. So,
and I think when I came and spoke to your class too, which I think probably surprised you at the time, was also just don't go to university because, as you say, you're bright and that's what you think you're supposed to do. Like, it's a very expensive exercise to spend however many years at university doing something you think you're supposed to do, and go, and if you can afford it, travel or take a year off for work and things like that. Like you got so many years to work. So if that's something is what you want to do, then it's great. But I just think sort of keeping your eye open. And that's what this podcast is great, is that there isn't just those 5 jobs that we used to think about and know of, and that's what you sort of, basically those are your only opportunities and things like that. And that's even, like my husband, I talk about it, my little girl, like the jobs that she's going to have available to her when she gets out there are just so different to what, we have now and things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I was going to put it in my intro, bringing people like you in. Morgan was another one I used to bring in. I'm not sure. I think she's with you guys.
Yes.
But it was always the lawyer that led to, it didn't eliminate all of them, but there might have been 10 kids who wanted to do law. Suddenly there was 5, which showed the power of it. That they were done with a complete misbelief of what that profession was actually about. And I thought the power was incredible that once they learnt the job, they honestly, whether they all thought they were off to court and to sort of the swagger in with their, I don't know, but clearly afterwards they were like, oh crap, I'm going to look at something else, which is really good. But look, thank you for your time. Like it's wicked and great to see you doing such a good job. And really cool. So thank you for spending that time. Thank the company for us.
Quick question. I do marketing and we work a lot with in-house lawyers for packaging in particular, again, in the States. And they're very thorough. Everything gets signed off by regulatory review. Something going in-house as opposed to a firm, is that something desirable for you or for any lawyer at a stage? Or is there, is there a stereotype of in-house versus firm? I don't know.
No, definitely not. And again, I think it's probably when you first start out, you don't know that that's a possibility. You just, you just see being a lawyer, you work in a law firm. But yeah, in-house is definitely something that I think is great. I know a few people that have left Tompkins Wake that have sort of gone into that role. One, she works in-house at Vodafone. So it's quite a good way of getting you into a whole bunch of different jobs. There was one recently come up that somebody was forwarding around actually, and it was at I think Heineken, and the ad kind of said, like good Friday night drinks or something like that, sort of thing. And so there is, and that's the thing, lots of those huge big international companies do have in-house counsel, and not just that, they have a number of them, and so you work as part of a team, and so it's great because you do a whole bunch of stuff. There's probably an element where you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know the answer to that. But that's also the good thing is you have external counsel. So we quite often are instructed by in-house counsel from companies because they're just like, this is outside of our expertise, basically. So yeah, definitely an option, and definitely some really cool some of those bigger companies particularly have those kind of roles. But there's also different things. So Ngāti Whātua was recently advertising again for like an in-house counsel, and again would be an incredibly interesting range of work that you would be coming up against there. So yeah.
That's so fascinating. Thank you. Last actual question we always ask, if you could go back to yourself in year 12, 13, what advice would you give specifically to Jacinda?
I don't know if it would be too much about work. I think it would just be like really make the most of life and surround yourself with good people. I think the people that, like I say, I've got those friends from high school still, and I just don't think that I could do any of even like my job and things like that without having those people there that you can, go and have a wine with and moan to, and things like that. But I also think, yeah, just making sure I've done some really epic stuff. I think I've been to 40 odd countries and things like that. So while I again work hard, and so that would probably be, I'd still go back and give myself that advice is, yeah, work hard for what you want, but also just make sure you get that balance right.
And on those good friends, make sure you send our love and take care, and we'll be in touch.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. See you.
All right.